The ship moved quietly through space. Inside, soldiers walked with careful steps. No one wanted to make noise near the sealed chamber at the center of the ship. "Status report on the asset," Commander Ta said. His voice was low and even. He never showed fear, but all his men knew he felt it too. The young officer named Rock looked at his screen. "The Night Stalker is stable, sir. All vital signs normal." Commander Ta nodded. The Night Stalker. The most feared creature in the known galaxy. It was their greatest weapon and their greatest burden. Inside the sealed chamber, behind walls of the strongest metal in the galaxy, the creature lay still. It looked like a large dog, but no dog from any world had ever been like this. Its black fur absorbed light. Its muscles were dense and powerful. Its teeth could tear through ship hull metal. And its mind. Its mind was the most dangerous part. The Crixian scientists had made it too smart. They wanted a hunter that could track rebels across star systems. They got that. But they also got a creature that could learn, plan, and remember. It remembered everything. "Sir," Rock said, looking up from his screen, "we have entered the Zeta sector. The rebel base should be within range of the Night Stalker's senses." Commander Ta walked to the viewing window and looked down at the creature. "Prepare for deployment. Send the target sent through the ventilation system." The officer pressed buttons on his panel. Inside the chamber, small vents opened. The Night Stalker lifted its massive head. Its eyes opened, red eyes that seemed to glow from within. It sniffed the air once, twice. Then it stood. The soldiers watching stepped back, even though the creature was safely contained. The Night Stalker was 2 meters tall at the shoulder. Its claws scraped against the metal floor, leaving marks no tool should be able to make. "It has the scent," Rock whispered. Commander Ta nodded. "Prepare the drop pod. Alert the council that the hunt has begun." Across the galaxy, on every inhabited world, warnings appeared on communication screens. The message was always the same. "Warning. NIJHKSATALKER. Deployed in ZETACC. All civilian travel restricted. Remain in secure locations." Mothers pulled their children inside. Store owners locked their doors. Even hardened criminals sought hiding places. When the Night Stalker hunted, no one was safe. On the rebel base, hidden in an asteroid field, alarms began to sound. The rebel leader, a tall woman named Jin, looked at the alert with dread in her eyes. "They've sent it," she said to her officers. "They've sent the Night Stalker." Her second in command, a man with one eye, slammed his fist on the table. "We've hidden our base in the densest part of the asteroid field. Nothing can track us here." Jin shook her head. "It can. It always does." On the ship, Commander Ta watched as the drop pod was prepared. The Night Stalker paced in its chamber, ready for release. "Sir," Rock said, "should we set the control collar to level 3 restrictions?" Commander Ta thought for a moment. Level 3 would limit the creature's hunting range. Level 2 would let it hunt freely, but prevent it from killing everyone. Level 1. Level 1 was rarely used. It gave the Night Stalker almost complete freedom. Level 2, Ta decided. The rebel base has over 200 people. We need information from at least some of them. The drop pod opened. The door to the Night Stalker's chamber slid up. The creature walked forward, its movements smooth and controlled. It entered the pod without hesitation. It knew its purpose. As the pod launched toward the asteroid field, Commander Ta turned away. He had seen what happened next too many times. "Send word to the Galactic Council," he told Rock. "Tell them the Zeta Sector rebels will be eliminated by morning." The Night Stalker's pod cut through space like a bullet. Inside, red eyes glowed in the darkness. The hunt had begun. The Night Stalker's pod raced toward the rebel base, but halfway there, something went wrong. A large asteroid, not on any map, drifted into the pod's path. The impact was sudden and hard. Warning lights flashed inside the pod. Metal bent and tore. The navigation system failed. Inside, the Night Stalker was thrown against the wall. For the first time in its life, it felt pain it could not control. The creature let out a howl that no one could hear in the empty space. The damaged pod spun away from its path. Its emergency systems kicked in, searching for the nearest place to land. The small computer found a blue planet at the edge of the star system. On the military ship, Commander Todd watched in shock as the pod's signal went wild, then started moving in the wrong direction. "What happened?" he demanded. Rock's fingers moved fast over his screen. "Collision with an unmapped asteroid, sir. The pod has been damaged. It's changing course." "Override it," Ta shouted. "I can't, sir. Communication systems are down." Taz slammed his fist on the control panel. "Track it. Where is it going?" Rock looked up with fear in his eyes. "To a planet called Earth, sir. It's inhabited by humans." Tay's face went pale. "Prepare my ship and contact the Council immediately." On Earth, in a small village nestled between mountains and forests in Korea, a girl named Jia walked slowly home from school. She was 12 years old, small for her age, with straight black hair that reached her shoulders. She walked alone, as she always did. The other children had stopped trying to talk to her months ago. Since the accident that took her parents, Jia had become like a shadow. She was there, but not really there. "Jia, wait." She turned. It was her grandfather, Han, coming from their small vegetable garden. He was old but still strong, his face weathered like the mountains around them. "You're home early," he said, smiling. Jia nodded. "Teacher was sick. We got to leave at lunch." "Ah, then you can help me with the radishes," Han said, holding up his dirt-covered hands. Jia tried to smile. "Later, grandfather. I want to go to the forest first." Han's smile faded a little. "Again, you spend too much time alone in those trees." "Please," Jia said quietly, "just for a little while." Han sighed. He could never say no to his granddaughter, not since she came to live with him, quiet and broken inside. "1 hour only," he said firmly. "Then radishes." Jia nodded and turned toward the forest path. The trees were her friends now. They didn't ask her to talk or smile. They just let her be. High above the earth, the damaged pod entered the atmosphere. Fire surrounded it as it fell. Inside, the Night Stalker's body was healing already, its special cells repairing damage faster than any normal creature could. The pod's simple computer searched for a landing spot away from large human settlements. It found a clearing in a forest on a mountainside. The landing was hard. The pod crashed through trees, leaving a long scar in the earth before coming to stop. Steam rose from its hot metal shell. Jia was sitting on her favorite rock when she heard the sound. It was like thunder, but sharper, and it didn't stop. Then came a crash that shook the ground under her feet. She stood up, heart beating fast. The sound had come from deeper in the forest, up the mountainside. Jia knew she should run home. She knew her grandfather would be worried. She knew it might be dangerous. But for the first time in months, she felt something besides sadness. She felt curious. Jia started walking up the mountain, following the path of broken trees. Smoke rose ahead. Something had fallen from the sky. As she got closer, she could see it. A metal object, long and rounded, half buried in the ground. It was like nothing she had ever seen before. Then, as Jia watched from behind a tree, part of the metal object opened. Something moved inside. Something big and dark. The most feared creature in the galaxy was on Earth. Jia hid behind a thick tree trunk. Her heart beat fast in her chest. She should run. She knew she should run. But her feet stayed planted on the ground. The metal door of the strange pod opened wider. A low growl came from inside. Then, slowly, the creature emerged. Jia had to cover her mouth to stop from gasping out loud. It was like a dog, but bigger than any dog she had ever seen. Its fur was black, so black that it seemed to swallow the sunlight around it. Its eyes glowed red like hot coals. The creature stepped out of the pod and then fell to the ground. It made a sound, half growl, half whine. Jia could see now that it was hurt. Its side had a deep cut, and one of its legs didn't move right. The creature tried to stand again, but couldn't. It dragged itself a few steps away from the pod, and then collapsed under a tree. Jia stayed hidden, watching. The creature's breathing was heavy. Its red eyes blinked slowly. After a while, those eyes closed. The creature was either asleep or unconscious. Jia knew she should go home and tell her grandfather. He would call someone, the police or the army. But something kept her there, watching. The creature was scary, yes, but it was also hurt and alone, just like she had been after the accident. Slowly, very slowly, Jia backed away. She needed to think. She needed to decide what to do. In space, Commander Tay's ship raced toward Earth. "How long until we reach the planet?" he asked. Captain Jun checked the navigation screen. 6 Earth days, sir. We're pushing the engines as hard as we can. Ta frowned. 6 days is too long. The Night Stalker will have recovered by then, and who knows what damage it will do on an inhabited planet. Sir, Jun said carefully, should we alert the humans about what's coming? Ta shook his head. No, Earth is not part of the Galactic Alliance. They don't even know about us yet. We keep this quiet. Get in, recover the asset, get out. And if there are incidents, sir. Commander Tay's face was hard. We clean them up. No witnesses. Jia returned to the forest the next morning. In her backpack, she carried bandages, water, and some of her grandfather's dried beef. She had told Han she was going to her special place in the forest. It wasn't exactly a lie. Jia approached the crash site carefully. The pod was still there, its metal skin now cool. She looked around for the creature. It had moved. It was no longer under the tree where she had seen it last. Jia felt fear rise in her throat. Where was it now? Was it watching her? Then she saw it. The creature had dragged itself to a small stream about 20 steps away. It lay in the shallow water, drinking. Its wound looked better already, but the creature was still weak. Jia took a deep breath. Then, moving very slowly, she took the dried beef from her backpack. She placed it on a flat rock, in plain view. Then she backed away, about 10 steps, and sat down. The creature's head snapped up. Its red eyes locked onto her. It growled, a deep sound that made Jia's bones shake. But Jia didn't run. She pointed to the beef, then made eating motions with her hand. The creature watched her, its head tilted to one side. It seemed confused. Jia realized it probably didn't understand human gestures. She pointed to the beef again, then to the creature. "For you," she said quietly. "Food." The creature's ears twitched at the sound of her voice. It looked at the beef, then back at Jia. Slowly, it began to drag itself toward the food. Jia stayed very still. The creature reached the rock and sniffed the beef. Then, never taking its eyes off Jia, it ate the meat in one quick bite. When it was done, the creature made a sound. Not a growl this time. Something softer. Jia smiled, just a little. "You're welcome," she whispered. It was the first time she had smiled in months. Every day for the next week, Jia went to the forest. Each time, she brought something for the creature. Food, fresh water, and once, a blanket from her home. Each day, the creature seemed less afraid. And each day, Jia moved a little closer. By the 5th day, she could sit just 3 steps away from it. The creature's wound was almost gone now. Its red eyes weren't as bright and scary as before. "You need a name," Jia said to the creature on the 7th day. "I can't just call you creature in my head." The creature tilted its head, listening to her voice. Jia had noticed it seemed to like when she talked. "How about Da?" she said. "It means greatness in our language, and you are very great." The creature, Da, made a soft sound that wasn't quite a bark. Jill decided to take that as a yes. "Die it is," she said, smiling. That afternoon, something new happened. Jill was sitting near Day, just talking about her day at school, when Day suddenly stood up. For a moment, Jill was afraid. Dad was so tall, almost twice her height. But then Day moved closer to her and slowly, very slowly, lowered his big head. Gia held her breath. Day's head was right next to her hand now. She could feel his warm breath on her skin. Carefully, she lifted her hand and placed it on Day's head. His fur was soft, much softer than it looked. Gia gently moved her hand, petting him like she would a normal dog. Dad closed his eyes. "You like that, don't you?" Gia whispered. "I bet no one ever petted you before." At home, Grandfather Hand was worried. Gia was spending hours in the forest every day. She came home with her clothes dirty and sometimes torn. But strangely, she also seemed happier. She had started talking more, even smiling sometimes. That evening, as they ate dinner, Han decided to ask. "Gia," he said carefully, "what do you do in the forest all day?" Gia looked down at her rice bowl. "I just walk around and sit and think." "You're not getting into trouble, are you?" Gia shook her head quickly. "No, Grandfather, I'm careful." Han studied his granddaughter's face. She was hiding something, he was sure. But at least some light had returned to her eyes. "Just be home before dark," he said finally. "The mountains can be dangerous." If only he knew how dangerous, Gia thought. In space, Commander Tay's ship entered Earth's orbit. "We've located the pod signal," Captain Jun reported. "It's in a forested area near a small human settlement." "Any sign of the Night Stalker?" Tai asked. Jun checked his screen. "Yes, sir. Its tracker is still active. It's staying close to the crash site." "That's unusual," Ta said, frowning. "It should be hunting." "Maybe it's still injured from the crash." Ta shook his head. "It heals too fast for that. Something else is keeping it there." He turned to his team. "Prepare a small landing craft. Captain Jun, select 3 of your best men. We go in quiet, we get the asset, we leave. No traces." "Yes, sir," Jun said. "And if we encountered humans?" Commander Tay's face was cold. "Avoid if possible. Remove if necessary." The next morning, Gia arrived at the clearing earlier than usual. She had taken some meat from her grandfather's storage. He would be angry if he found out, but Gia didn't care. Day was waiting for her. As soon as Gia stepped into the clearing, he came to her, no longer afraid or suspicious. He lowered his big head for pets, which Gia happily gave. "I brought you something special today," she said, pulling the meat from her bag. As Dai ate, Gia noticed something strange about his ears. They kept twitching, turning in different directions. He seemed alert, tense. "What's wrong?" she asked. Suddenly, Day's head snapped up. He looked at the sky and made a low growling sound Gia hadn't heard before. "Dai, what is it?" The creature moved close to Gia, standing beside her like he was protecting her. His red eyes glowed brighter. Day could sense something Gia couldn't. Something was coming. The small alien ship landed in the forest, about 5 miles from where Gia and Dai stood. The ship was built to be quiet. Its engines made almost no sound. Its outer skin changed color to match the trees around it. Commander Ta stepped out first, followed by Captain Jun and 3 soldiers. All of them wore dark suits that hid their body heat. "The Night Stalker is this way," Ta said, looking at a small device in his hand. The device showed a blinking red dot. "It hasn't moved from this area in days." "That's strange." "Sir," Captain Jun said, "our scans show a small human settlement nearby. Should we be concerned?" Ta frowned. "Let's get the asset and leave before any humans notice us. Move out." The 5 aliens began to walk through the forest, following the signal from Day's tracker. Day was still growling at the sky. Jia had never seen him act this way before. "What's wrong?" she asked again, petting his side to calm him. "Is it a storm coming?" But Dad wasn't looking at the clouds. He was looking in the direction of the mountains. Suddenly, he nudged Jia hard with his head, pushing her toward the path that led home. "You want me to go?" Jia asked, confused. "But I just got here." Day nudged her again, harder this time. His red eyes were bright with what looked like worry. Okay, Jia said. "But I'll come back tomorrow. I promise." Day watched her until she was out of sight. Then he turned to face the direction where he had sensed the ship landing. His body became very still. Only his nose moved, testing the air. The Night Stalker remembered these smells. They were the smells of his masters, the ones who had made him hunt, the ones who had hurt him when he failed. They were coming for him. Jia walked slowly home, wondering why Da had acted so strange. When she reached her house, she saw her grandfather talking to another old man she didn't recognize. "Ah, Jia," Han called. "Come meet my old friend Min. We served in the army together, many years ago." Jia bowed politely to the man. He was tall and thin, with serious eyes. "Hello, Jia," Min said. "Your grandfather tells me you spend a lot of time in the forest." Jia looked at her grandfather, who smiled innocently. She knew what he was doing. He was worried about her, so he had asked his friend to talk to her. "I like the trees," Jia said simply. Min nodded. "The forest can be dangerous. Have you seen anything unusual up there lately?" Jia's heart beat faster. Did they know about Da? Had someone else seen him? "No," she said, maybe too quickly. "Nothing unusual." Min and Han exchanged a look that Jia didn't understand. "Some hikers reported strange lights in the sky a week ago," Min said. "Right over our forest. I'm just checking if everything is normal." Jia remembered the crash, the pod falling from the sky. "I haven't seen any lights," she said. Min seemed to study her face for a moment. "Well, if you do see anything strange, you tell your grandfather right away, okay?" Jia nodded, but in her head she was thinking about Da. Was he what Min was looking for? Was he in danger? In the forest, Commander Tazteen was getting closer to Da's signal. "The asset should be just ahead," Ta said, checking his device. "Weapons ready. But remember, we need it alive." The soldiers drew their stun guns. These weapons wouldn't kill Da, but they would knock him out long enough to get him back to the ship. They moved forward quietly, spreading out among the trees. Captain Jun was the first to reach the clearing where Da had been staying. "Sir," he called softly, "you need to see this." Commander Ta came forward. In the clearing, he saw the remains of food, human food. And there, next to Da's sleeping spot, was a blanket. "Someone has been feeding it," Ta said in disbelief. "A human has been taking care of the most dangerous creature in the galaxy." "What do we do, sir?" Jun asked. Tay's face hardened. "Find the human. They've seen too much. And find the Night Stalker before it bonds completely with this human. If that happens, we may never get it back." In the trees nearby, Dai watched and listened. He understood their language. He knew what they planned to do. And for the first time in his life, the Night Stalker felt something new. The need to protect someone else. That night, Jia couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Da and why he had acted so strange. She worried that something bad was going to happen to him. Around midnight, she heard soft voices from the kitchen. Carefully, she got out of bed and tiptoed to her door. She opened it just a crack and listened. "I'm telling you, Anne, something is out there," Min was saying. He had stayed for dinner and was still there. "Our sensors picked up an energy signature that doesn't match anything we know." "And you think it's in our forest?" Grandfather Han asked. "I think it's very close to where your granddaughter goes every day." Jia's heart beat faster. They were talking about Da's pod. They must have found it. "I want you and Jia to stay with my family in the city for a few days," Min continued. "Just until we check everything out." "Jia won't want to leave," Han said. "She's attached to that forest. Han, this could be dangerous. We don't know what, or who, might have landed there. Jia had heard enough. She closed her door silently and went to her window. She had to warn Da. She had to help him hide. Jia looked out at the dark forest. It was night, and she had never gone there after dark. But Day needed her. She opened her window and climbed out. Commander Tai and his men had set up a base camp near where they found the signs of human contact. They had search drones flying over the forest, looking for the Night Stalker. "Sir, we've picked up movement," one of the soldiers reported. "Something small, moving through the trees toward the clearing." Ta looked at the screen. Too small to be the Night Stalker. Must be an animal. "Wait," Captain Jun said, looking closer. "That's not an animal. That's a human child." Tay's eyes narrowed. "The one who's been feeding our asset. Perfect. Capture the child. The Night Stalker will come to us." Jia moved carefully through the dark forest. She had brought a small light, but she tried not to use it much. She didn't want anyone to see her. The forest was different at night. Every sound made her jump. Branches seemed to reach for her like hands. But she kept going, following the path she knew so well. When she reached the clearing, Dai wasn't there. The blanket she had brought him was gone too. "Dai," she called softly. "Where are you?" No answer came. Jia felt tears in her eyes. Had Da left? Was he gone forever? Then she heard a soft sound behind her. She turned quickly. Day stood there, his red eyes glowing in the dark. He had the blanket in his mouth. He dropped it at her feet. "There you are," Jia whispered, relief washing over her. She reached out to pet him, but Day pulled back. He made a low sound and moved away, looking back at her. He wanted her to follow him. Jia picked up the blanket and followed Day deeper into the forest, up the mountain. They walked for almost an hour until they came to an old temple. It was small and looked like no one had used it in many years. Day went inside, and Jia followed. It was dry and quiet inside. Da had made a kind of nest in one corner with leaves and the blanket. "Is this your new home?" Jia asked. Day made a soft sound that Jia took as a yes. Then he did something strange. He went to the wall of the temple and touched it with his nose. The wall began to glow with soft blue light. Images appeared, like a movie playing on the wall. Jia watched in wonder. The images showed Da, but in a different place. A metal room where people who didn't look quite human did things to him. They hurt him. They made him hunt. They punished him when he didn't want to hurt others. Tears filled Jia's eyes as she watched. "They were mean to you," she whispered. Day made a sad sound. Then the images changed, showing the people who had hurt him coming to Earth, looking for him. "They're here," Jia gasped. "They're trying to find you." Day nodded his big head. Then he showed more images of Jia and Da running away together. "You want us to hide?" Jia asked. Day's eyes seemed to say yes, and something more, something like, "I will protect you." Jia put her arms around Da's neck. "And I'll protect you too," she promised. "We'll stay together." Morning came. At Jia's house, Grandfather Han discovered her empty bed. His hand shook as he called Min. "She's gone," Han said, his voice breaking. "Jia is gone." Her window was open. Min arrived quickly with his men. They carried strange devices Han had never seen before. "We'll find her," Min promised. "My team has been tracking unusual energy in the forest. If Jia is there, we'll find her too." Han looked at the men and their gear. "Who are you people, really? Those aren't normal search tools." Min put his hand on his old friend's shoulder. "I work for a special government team. We study things that aren't from Earth, and I think something not from Earth is in our forest." Han's eyes widened. "And my Jia is out there with it." At the old temple, Jia woke up curled against Da's warm side. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she remembered. The sneaking out, the long walk, the temple, and Day's strange pictures on the wall. "Good morning," she said to Day, who was already awake and watching the door. Day made a soft sound but didn't move from his spot. His ears were up, turning like little radar dishes. "Is someone coming?" Ja asked. As if answering her question, Day stood up. He went to the temple door and looked out, then came back to Ja. He nudged her toward the back of the temple, where there was a small hole in the wall, just big enough for Ja to crawl through. "You want me to hide?" Ja asked. Day nudged her again, more urgently this time. "But what about you?" Day's red eyes seemed to say, "Trust me." Ja crawled through the hole into a small space that might have once been a storage room. From there, she could see through cracks in the wall into the main temple room. Outside, voices approached, human voices and other voices that sounded different. Commander Tai led his men up the mountain path. Their trackers had located the Night Stalker's signal at an old building ahead. "Remember," Ta said, "we need the asset alive. Use stun weapons only." Captain June walked beside him. "And the human child?" "Sir." Before Tai could answer, new voices called from behind them. Ta turned to see a group of humans coming up the path. They were led by an older man in some kind of uniform. "That's far enough," the human said. It was Min with his Special Forces team. "Identify yourselves." Ta looked annoyed. This was a complication he didn't need. "This doesn't concern you," he said. "Leave now, and you won't be harmed." Min's men raised their weapons. "This is our land. You are the ones who should leave." A tense silence fell over the forest. Two groups faced each other on the mountain path. Humans with their simple guns, and aliens with their advanced weapons. Then a new voice broke the silence. "Stop." Everyone turned. An old man pushed his way through Min's group. It was Grandfather Han. "I just want my granddaughter," he said, looking at the aliens without fear. "Please, she's all I have left." From her hiding place, Jia could see Da pacing in the temple. His body was tense, ready to fight. She knew she should stay hidden, but when she heard her grandfather's voice outside, she couldn't help herself. "Grandfather," she called, crawling out from her hiding spot. Day turned to her with what looked like panic in his red eyes. He tried to nudge her back to safety, but it was too late. The temple door burst open. Commander Ta stood there, with Captain June beside him. Behind them, Jia could see her grandfather and Min. "There she is," Han cried. "Jia." But no one moved forward. All eyes were on Da, who now stood between Jia and the door. His massive body blocked her from view. A deep growl came from his throat. "Step away from the human child, Night Stalker," Commander Tad ordered in a cold voice. "Return to your masters now." Da's growl grew louder. He didn't move. Jia placed her small hand on Da's side. "It's okay," she whispered to him. Then, speaking louder to everyone else, she said, "His name is Da, and he's not going anywhere." Everyone stood very still in the temple doorway. Da's red eyes moved from person to person, watching for any threat to Jia. Commander Ta stepped forward. "This is not a game, child. That creature beside you has killed hundreds of beings across the galaxy. It was made to hunt and destroy. His name is Da," Jia said again. "And he's my friend." Ta laughed, a cold sound with no joy in it. "Friend? The Night Stalker doesn't have friends. It doesn't understand kindness or love. It only understands orders and fear." "You're wrong," Jia said. She kept her hand on Da's side. "He understands more than you know." Min moved closer to Han. "What is that thing, exactly?" he whispered. "It's called a Night Stalker," Captain June answered, hearing the question. "The most dangerous hunting creature in the known galaxy. It was created in our labs to track rebels and criminals." "Created?" Han asked, his eyes wide. "It is a weapon," Ta said firmly. "Our weapon, and we have come to take it back." Da's growl grew deeper. His body tensed, ready to attack if anyone moved toward Jia. "He doesn't want to go with you," Jia said. "You hurt him. You made him do bad things." Ta pulled out a small silver device from his pocket. "The Night Stalker doesn't have choices. It does what we tell it to do." He pressed a button on the device. A red light began to blink. Day suddenly stiffened. His body shook. He made a sound of pain that broke Jia's heart. "Stop it," she cried. "You're hurting him." "It has a control chip in its brain," Tai explained calmly. "It cannot disobey when this is activated." Day fell to his knees, his big body trembling. But his eyes stayed fixed on Jia, and he did not move away from her. "Something's wrong," Captain Jun said, looking confused. "The Night Stalker should be fully under control by now." Tai pressed the button again, harder this time. The light on the device glowed brighter. "Night Stalker, come to your master now." Day let out a howl of pain, but still, he did not move from Jia's side. "Impossible," Ta whispered. "No creature can resist the control chip." Min took this moment to step forward. "I think that's enough. You're on Earth now, and that girl is under our protection. Whatever your creature decides, you have no right to force it." "This doesn't concern your planet," Ta said angrily. "The Night Stalker is Crixian property." "Day is not property," Jia shouted. Tears ran down her face as she watched her friend suffer. "He can think and feel just like us. He should be free to choose." Grandfather Han moved past the aliens and walked slowly toward Jia. Day's head turned to watch him, but he did not growl. "Jia," Han said gently, "I don't understand what's happening. But I can see this. Day is trying to protect you. Is he really your friend?" Jia nodded, wiping her tears. "He showed me his memories, Grandfather. They used him like a tool. They hurt him when he didn't want to hurt others." Han looked into Day's red eyes for a long moment. Then he turned to face Ta. "The girl is right. This creature should have a choice." "This is absurd," Ta said. He raised his weapon and pointed it at Day. "If the control chip won't work, we'll take it by force." Everything happened very fast then. Ta fired his weapon. The blue light shot toward Da, but Day moved with incredible speed, pushing Jia behind him. The blue light hit him square in the chest. Day didn't fall. He stood his ground, even as the stun blast made his legs shake. Again, Tai ordered his men, "All weapons." But before anyone could fire, Min's team raised their guns. "That's enough," Min said firmly. "Lower your weapons or we'll be forced to defend ourselves." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, a new voice spoke from behind them all. "I believe we have seen what we needed to see." Everyone turned. A tall figure stood in the temple doorway. It was not human, but it was not like Tai either. It had pale blue skin and eyes that seemed too wise for any living thing. "Who are you?" Ta demanded. The figure smiled. "I am the Observer, and I think it's time for the Galactic Council to step in." Commander Tay's face went pale. "Observer? The Council sent an observer here." The blue-skinned figure nodded. "We have been watching this situation with great interest." Ta lowered his weapon slowly. Even he would not dare to fight against the Galactic Council. They ruled over all the star systems, even his own. The observer walked into the temple. Everyone moved aside to let him pass. He stopped in front of Dai and Jia. "A most unusual friendship," he said, his voice kind. "The deadliest hunter in the galaxy and a human child." "His name is Da," Jia said, still keeping her hand on Da's side. "And he's not a hunter anymore. He just wants to be free." The observer smiled. "Yes, I can see that." He turned to Commander Ta. "Your experiment has become something more than a weapon, Commander. The Night Stalker has developed what we call emotional intelligence." "That's impossible," Tay argued. "It was made to hunt and kill. Nothing more." "And yet," the observer said, pointing to how Da still protected Jia, Here it stands, choosing to shield this child instead of obeying its masters. Grandfather Han stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said politely, "but who exactly are you people? Where do you come from?" The observer turned to him. "We come from the stars, just as your stories have always said. There are many worlds with many different kinds of life. Your Earth is just one of them." Min laughed softly. "I knew it," he said. "All those years of watching the skies, and now you're finally here." The observer nodded. "Yes, and your world has shown us something important today." He gestured to Ja and Da. "This child has taught the galaxy's most feared creature how to care. This is a rare gift." Commander Ta was not happy. "The Night Stalker is Crixian property. We created it. We own it. No living thing with a mind of its own can be property," the observer said firmly. "The council has watched and decided. The one called Da has earned his freedom." Jia's face lit up with joy. "Really? Da can stay here?" The observer nodded. "If that is what he chooses." All eyes turned to Da. He looked at Jia, then at the temple door leading outside, then back at Jia. Slowly, he sat down beside her. His choice was clear. Tay's hands balled into fists. "This is outrageous. The council can it." "The council can and has," the observer interrupted. "In fact, there is more." He looked at Min and Han. "Your world has shown great compassion today. The council grants Earth provisional membership in the Galactic Alliance." Min's eyes widened. "We're joining a space alliance." "The first step," the observer said. "And we will need ambassadors, those who can help humans understand other worlds." He looked at Da and Jia. "Perhaps they could help with that." "My granddaughter, an ambassador to aliens?" Han asked, looking shocked. Jia smiled up at him. "I already made one alien friend, grandfather. Maybe I can make more." The observer turned to Commander Ta. "Your mission here is over. The council expects your immediate return to Crixian space." Ta looked like he wanted to argue more, but Captain Jun put a hand on his arm. "Sir," Jun said quietly, "we should go." Ta gave Da one last angry look, then turned and left the temple. His men followed him. After they were gone, the observer knelt down to Jia's level. "Taking care of Da will be a big job. He has much to learn about living in peace. I can teach him," Jia said confidently, "and he can teach me about the stars." The observer stood up. "The council will be watching your progress, but for now, I think your grandfather would like to take you home." Han stepped forward and hugged Jia tightly. "Yes, please. No more running away to temples in the middle of the night." Jia laughed. "Sorry, grandfather, but can Da come too?" Han looked at the huge creature that had become his granddaughter's friend. "I suppose we can make room, but he sleeps in the yard, not in your bedroom." As they left the temple together, the girl, her grandfather, and the galaxy's former deadliest hunter, Da looked up at the sky. For the first time in his life, he was not a weapon. He was not a hunter. He was just Da, friend to a brave human girl. And somehow, that felt exactly right. Far above them, the stars twinkled like friendly eyes watching over their new beginning.